And I have a friend who's going to help us appreciate why some men are probably sick and tired, and we don't even know it, but we've got some help. This is the Intensified Life TV with Dr. Lakeisha B. Brothers are in trouble, and a lot of them are working themselves to death, literally in early grade. I did a post not too long ago about what my addiction is and has been, but I'm overcoming it. I thought I'd bring on a brother to get a perspective from the other side. It's the series I do, trying to get a little bit closer into the male mentality, but more than that, to help some brothers who might need a listening ear and encouragement from the stories of other brothers. I know you don't get a woman to interview you often, but these are good friends of mine. And to kick it off and to introduce my return to Intensified Life TV, I have Dr. Marlon Smith. Now, Marlon and I have known each other for a good 20 years, maybe even a little bit more. But what I've noticed about his life in the last few years is that it's pretty complicated. And well, let him tell the story. Marlon, thank you so much for joining me. This is the holiday season, so I know you could be doing a lot of other things, but I appreciate that you are taking time to share a little bit about what you've experienced recently.
You know, it's my pleasure, sister. Whenever you call, I'm going to answer.
That's right. That's right. You sure do. And I hope you will continue. Life for me has changed, as you know. I'm a married lady, but don't make those
Sadie, married lady. That's it. You know, I said
whatever. Let's talk about you. As I said, the other side is all about a male's perspective on a wide range of topics. But this one I know you can relate to because we talk often enough for me to know what life has been like in the last few years. Not just that we've all been through a pandemic. Praise God, we're coming out and on the other side of most of that. But your personal life has given me a lot to think about. And you've done something recently that took a long time for you to get to. If you don't mind, just give us the 10-second version. What did you do recently that was totally out of your norm, but you're willing to talk about?
I went ahead and started looking for a therapist, a clinical therapist, and I just booked my first therapeutic appointment that will take place literally the day after Christmas. So I'll have my very first therapy session.
I'm excited for you, and I'm excited because I know this is a big step. Let me just ask you a few questions to get others to know the depth of your life story and all that you juggle at one time. So if you can count briefly, how many jobs have you had in the last 10 years?
In the last 10 years, so that would start with 2012.
Yes.
I teach at the University of Houston. At the time, I worked for a nonprofit organization called Interchange Freedom Initiative, which is a pre-release prison reentry program for prison fellowship ministries, working with men who are incarcerated, overseeing their reentry back into the world. I transitioned from that to working on my PhD, completing my PhD while also teaching. Went on after I finished to a larger organization called Baker Ripley, working in the president's office as their senior manager over policy and engagement, working with nonprofits and governmental organizations. I continued to teach at the university, moving from community college to, like I said, to the University of Houston. I founded a nonprofit called Black Greek Speak, Social Justice and Human Rights Council, where we were a policy studies and advocacy organization. In addition to that, I have a consulting firm, and I also do have another nonprofit that I now work for called the Women's Home, which is a mental health organization for helping women and their families in their positions of recovery. So I've always had at least 4 jobs at one time.
Yes,
that doesn't include being a father.
Right, and a father and a grandfather.
And abuelo. A grandfather. Yeah, yes. That's right, abuelo. Yeah,
abuelo. So I'm not even going to make a joke about that because you know what we used to say back in the day. Don't say it. Just make we have an understanding. But you really have been working and juggling many things since you were like a teenager.
Yeah, I started working the way I grew up. I started working when I was about 12 years old in my great grandmother's beauty shop uh, on the weekends. That was the way I was raised, that men work. And
Stop. Hold on. This is going to be one of those hinge pins, one of those major places we jump off into some other things, because that mentality is good. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Men ought to work, okay? Especially if you are able, there's no reason why you shouldn't. Amen. Men ought to work. And women, but we're talking about men today.
but I often heard a man who does not work ought not eat.
I was going there, sir.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But we know where that's from. That's the word of God. So if
Right.
if you don't work, you ought not eat. So the bottom line is that work is good. So let's just put that out there. A work ethic or a theology of work means that God gave work, and it is good. Now there are some other things that happen thereafter, but to have something to do that is productive and meaningful and yields results is a good thing. It's a God-given gift to work. Now the thing about that though is that over time, men in particular get attached to work in ways that can be unhealthy. Now, if you've been working since you were 12 and then multiple jobs since you were a teenager, and I know that part of that is because you were a single father, you were a teenage father and all of that, but providing for your child, let me just say kudos, because there are some who don't think that's a priority or a responsibility that would require more than one job, but you were of a different mindset, right?
When I had a daughter, my daughter was born when I was in college. I never worked less than 2 part-time jobs and while going to college full time because
Right.
I needed to take care of her. So yes,
Yeah.
and I was a single father. I literally was a single father. I had to take ownership of that work for various reasons
Okay.
that was
So
required.
that mentality not only started when you were 12 that a man ought to work. So you saw that, but then it moved forward to you having a responsibility that you took ownership of, and you did what you had to do. But then moving forward in life. Now I know, how old is your daughter today?
31. Lord, I say that out loud. She's 31.
Say that out.
I was 18 turning 19 when she was born. So I was I
Wow.
was a baby too. Yeah.
Yeah, really. And moving forward, then the mentality of men ought to work and multiple jobs and the grind and the hustle that I've always known you to be on, juggling so many things. But most recently, what got you to the place that you needed to schedule your first therapy session?
Well, there was a confluence of a lot of different things. One, in 2018, my grandmother, who was really my rock and my foundation, she passed away, and I had to manage her estate during that time, and that was in 2018. And then in 2019, my father, who raised me, was diagnosed with prostate cancer. It had come back. And at the end of 2019, December 2019, he came down with me to get some medical procedures done, to do some testing. He came back in 2020 and the pandemic hit. And so he and my mother moved in with me, and I cared for them through the 2020, through the pandemic, as he was going through his cancer treatments. But in 2021, he died of cancer. 3 months later, my sister died, and from COVID. And then just a few months ago, my uncle died from cancer. So I had, between 2018 and 2022, 4 deaths in my family, from my grandmother to my father to my sister, then to my uncle. And so that in itself took a lot of things going on. My daughter was going through some things just personally and financially, and I was there trying to support her in that work. And then I had my own kind of professional career, which for me, my work is my ministry, right? It is the thing that I do. So it's not just, for me, it's not just what I do, it is who I am. But I recognize that I was pouring out for family, work, and even fraternity because I was very active. I am very active in my fraternity and leadership in that work. And I just realized that I was feeling weighted down. And I recently turned 50 this year. And I realized that my body could not handle the weight of the stress that in my 20s and 30s I was holding and managing. And I also realized at that time that my body wasn't handling it well in my 20s and 30s, but I was just under the guise that I was just doing what I had to do.
Yeah.
And but I started realizing that as I started looking at friends of mine my age, they were passing away, literally dying. And I had to say to myself, I can't let this kill me, because I can't be the help that I want to be if I'm in the grave. So a lot of those things are what really said, you need to get some help. And I'm a counselor, right? But so it's funny, being a counselor, I didn't know or couldn't figure out what the benefit of me going to a counselor was. So
you know what? Hold on. I just have to say that's very, I think that's common, more common than we may realize. And it's primarily because if you are a counselor, there's a lot of self-talk that goes on.
Right. I'm very introspective. I'm constantly asking myself those reflective questions. I'm constantly trying to assess what tools I need in order to kind of move and excavate in my own history and in my own life,
right,
how to improve. But I realized that I'd become a one-man show, and that was no longer productive for me. And I could literally feel myself falling down. I could feel myself literally physically falling down. And I knew at that moment I needed to do something different.
Yeah. I'm going to pause here and ask you to look into your camera, because you're looking down. So start looking into the camera. It feels weird, but just start looking into the camera. Okay. So you say you started feeling yourself falling down. Yes. And we were not created to handle all of this. What our culture does is really train us to think that the grind and the hustle and that feeling of pressure and tension and all of that is just par for the course. It's just kind of what you have to do to get it done. I mentioned, the no pain, no gain. You got to pay your dues. You just got to grind it, bear under it, and get it done. And really, that's counterproductive, because we were not created for that. There are seasons, yes, you got to put a little extra in, but to live in that space for an extended amount of time, to actually make that your norm, and peace and rest, something so obscure that you can't even conceive of what it is to take a break, that is not normal. That we've normalized the toxicity of the hustle and grind, and we are paying for it in our bodies, just as you described, and also with our mental health. Tell me a little bit about, let me just pause and acknowledge that anyone who has had a similar experience, I hope that you will take heed to what Marlon has said and pay attention to your body. Pay attention to the warning signs. Pay attention to the sleepless nights, the cramps, the inability to focus. Pay attention to the things that you also probably normalize as just what is supposed to happen right now, or that, I'm just of a certain age. But there are people who live healthy lives, even advanced in years, but it's because they take care of themselves. And they learn how to prioritize rest, and they learn how to pay attention to their bodies at an earlier age. Let me also say to those who might be 30 or younger, because there's a lot in grind culture, a lot in the hustle, especially with social media pressuring people to do more, put out more, go, 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 be, and you're already seeing some signs. But our youth and our exuberance, or just the excitement of the next thing, causes us to ignore those warning signs when God might be trying to tap you on the shoulder so you don't get into a habit that really becomes detrimental in your future. Marlon, I want you to take us back, because you said something I don't know that everybody can appreciate. And I think that sometimes we gloss over loss. We know that death is a part of life, the human experience, but multiple losses. And then on top of that, a pandemic, which I can't even describe how that compounded a sense of grief and loss for the world. Everybody was grieving one way or another. No person on earth was untouched by death. Whether it was someone close to you or a friend or a neighbor, it was all around us. We could not escape it. And so for you personally, to live through such very significant losses in your family and then the pandemic and all of that, how did you feel, or how do you even feel now about coming to the place where you had to face the fact that you needed to open up? Because you handled it very differently. Tell us about how you even handled it when it was going on.
Right. So I think the thing that I have to say is I can look back now and I can reflect a little bit better. But I grew up under this idea as a Black man, you're going to have to work twice as hard to get half as much. That to work hard is just the life that you got to have. So whenever you encounter obstruction or resistance, you have to figure out how to press through. And that's what I was taught. So you can't complain about it. Either you're going to lay down and die or you're going to press through. And I remember in my 20s, I was working a full-time job. I was in graduate seminary at TCU. And of course, as I said, I was being a parent. And I remember my grandmother, my mother are beauticians, and they worked in a beauty shop. And I remember my right eye used to twitch like all the time. It started twitching. And I remember going to my grandmother and I said, my eye is twitching. I don't know why it won't stop twitching. And she said, that's your nerves. What are you nervous about? And I said, I'm not nervous about anything. And that twitch would get so bad at times that I would be driving and I would have to stop and put both of my hands over my eyes to kind of get my eyes to stop twitching. And that twitch lasted for 10 years. And I remember driving to work. I was working for a church in Houston, Texas. And I remember driving to the church. I just started working with that church. You know the one. And I remember I was driving and I noticed that my eyes hadn't been twitching. And at that moment, it dawned on me that that was the nerves that my grandmother was talking about. And I didn't know it. I didn't know that all of that stuff had compressed so that my eyes. So that made me start being much more conscious of what my body was doing. That was one. So I literally went from 24 to 34 with my eyes just constantly twitching and not knowing why I was doing so. And when I discovered it, I decided to make sure that I'm much more conscious of what my body is telling me. That was one. So when my father and mother moved in with me and COVID hit and his cancer treatments and the doctor telling you need to prepare for the end, I just realized that I needed to do some things differently and my body started responding and I needed to begin to get some things done and I switched. What I always did though was work. When my father died, I left the day before his funeral to drive down to his funeral. I preached his funeral. And then right after that funeral, I came home. The same thing with my sister. She died. I came down the day before. The next day, that same day, I drove back home and I went back to work. And that was the life that I lived with my
But
uncle.
who told you I get that that was in your mentality. I understand that. But you've seen people around you. You've had exposure to wisdom. You have access. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm thinking to myself, why would you think that's okay? And maybe even were you just trying to escape the grief, to get busy again as a way of channeling your energy so that you wouldn't have to sit with the fact of you had to process these losses? Like, why would you think that's okay?
I know it sounds simple, but as a man and a father, I have responsibilities. So the idea in my mind of stopping just wasn't there.
But are you not also a responsibility for you.
I am. And that's great to say, right? And and intellectually, I know that. But once again, I was always told you have to press through. And
Okay.
it's I, and yeah, so that's what I have to work on, because
Yeah.
my normal inclination is to press and fight through, because I got to. That's what I was told.
So let me stop here, because this is part of what we want to help change. What was the trigger? I understand you started recognizing what was going on in your body, but recently you decided to make some drastic changes and now you're going to see a therapist. What do you think was the one thing that says, okay, now I really have to do something different?
My boss told me I needed to go get therapy.
Oh, so now was this a threat? Like you had to, you were going to lose? Okay,
No, it wasn't
just
a
making
threat.
sure. Okay.
It wasn't a threat. I told her all the things that I had going on. And I remember I was telling her about a project that I had just completed. And I said I was working to finish this project. And she said to me, she said, well, whose deadline was this? And I was like, mine. Like,
Hmm.
and she looked at me like, well, why did you press that? And and it couldn't, it stunned me for a minute. Like, well, you put this on yourself. Why would you do
Yes.
that?
Yes. Yes. It is internalized. What was external at one time, starting when you were 12, became internalized, and then it's your own voice. It's no longer your grandmother. It's your own voice, your own values, your own life. You created a system, a process, a way of living, and now it's killing you, and you can't even get out of it by yourself.
Right. And so she gave me an assignment where she asked me to put together a personal wellness plan for myself.
That's a
And so
great idea.
yeah. And so the thing was, I came home, as any assignment that I get, a work I get, it became a work project. And I remember sitting down saying, okay, well, let me get this personal wellness plan done so I can make sure I get it turned in. And what was surprising was I couldn't write it. I didn't know what to write for my own personal wellness plan. And at that moment, I said I'm in trouble,
Yeah.
because I didn't know how to even write a wellness plan for myself. And I've done those for so many other people.
I know, you know what? If you were to be asked, if anybody asked Marlon to put together a program or to lead a project, a community service project, a big old, I don't know, some kind of symposium on affairs in Africa and how it impacts. But listen, you're laughing, but everybody knows Marlon could do that. But it's so amazing to hear that, to take care of yourself, you couldn't sit down and think about, what do I need to be healthy, to be whole? And that for me was a moment I realized, and I'm speaking this to you, but I know that there are so many. I think about pastors, especially. I think about caregivers. I think about other counselors and therapists too, but I think about men in particular who are killing themselves, taking care of everything and everyone else because that's what they were shaped to think. That's how they were molded. That's what became an internal drive, because they were never given permission to consider how they should live as healthy human beings.
It
This
was.
is,
It was very helpful. It was very. It was so astonishing that it broke me down. I literally sat there with the pen and paper and just started to cry, because I'm like, so you mean I can't? I don't even know how to help myself, and that that took me over, and that was
and you
when I
know what?
really.
That's almost in contradiction to what we've been taught. That's what you're supposed to be able to help yourself and get up, almost pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, which is almost impossible. But you're supposed to be able to just grind through. And when you realize you can't, is there a sense of maybe helplessness, vulnerability, weakness? Did you struggle with any of that, or were you just okay in
I
resting?
didn't feel vulnerable. I didn't feel weak, and I felt powerless.
Yeah, okay, that's the word. Okay.
And so I felt like, you mean if I don't have the power to even help myself, then how can I really have the power to help anyone?
Mm.
And and honestly, I thought about, this means that if I can't help myself, then I'm not going to be here. So all these things that I find so dear and so important, my community, my family, my children, um, they're not going to have me here to help them, because once again, it's kind of like, you're flying in the airplane and they tell you first put the mask on yourself before
Yes,
you try to put it on
yes, yes,
somebody else.
yes, yes,
And
yes.
really what that said to me was, I don't have a mask that I know how to put on myself.
Wow.
And so
Wow.
I was
I
like,
don't
wow.
have a mask that I know how to put. So even if you did have one, I don't even know how to put it on. I
Oh,
don't
you know how
have
to
a
put it on?
mask that I know how to put on myself. Woo,
How to,
that's a lot.
so
That's a lot. Wow. So let me ask then, now that you made the decision to go to see a therapist, was making that appointment difficult? Because I also know men who say, I don't want to go talk to somebody about my problem. I don't want to sit up and talk about all this stuff. That women do that. Women chat, chat, chat. Y'all put that on women all the time. And there are some spaces and places where we do come up for air and find a way to seek therapists and counseling more often than men. But that's why we're doing this conversation. That's why we're having this, so that men can see, especially Black men, minority men, men of color, because I remember seeing the meme on social media. You know how we make fun of brothers and we put a meme out when they cry and when they do all that, but when they really need help, that's why they find it difficult to seek it. So when you made the call, when you set the appointment, what were you feeling, and what would you say to another brother who might be struggling about the same issue?
wow. So I was lucky. I worked for a mental health organization, right? But ironically, I work for a mental health organization that targets women, not men. But I was lucky at least to work here. And when I realized that I couldn't put together a mental health personal care plan for myself, I had a meeting with our leadership team and I told them, I said, I couldn't believe this. And so, one, unlike many men, I literally worked for an organization that could provide me tools to where to begin, because I literally didn't know where I would begin. And so they started helping me understand the questions that I needed to ask, the things that I needed to consider. They started sending me links that I could go to, things that I could read online, that I could trust. And even with all of that, I realized how difficult it is to have a therapist. One, I found out that some of the best therapists don't take insurance. So, you know,
Oh,
so
yeah.
I was lucky that I make an income that I didn't let that be a deterrent for me. But I did start, I remember my boss, God bless her. She asked me, she said, well, I want to send you this link because you're probably looking for an African American therapist. And that literally never crossed my mind. But when I started thinking about what I might need, I said, well, maybe I do need, because I'm still trying to figure out what I'm supposed to get out of therapy, what I'm supposed to do with therapy, and I did. Those things were all in my head. So
Because you're
since I
very
did,
heady, you're very
I'm very
analytical.
heady. I'm very heady. I'm asking those questions, and so really reading these therapists, what their approaches are, how they're thinking about the role of themselves as a therapist, where they really specialize, filling out several different applications where they ask you a lot of questions. They really did help me break down a therapist that, according to some of the things that they were asking, I was able to answer, and that helped me. I'll
Yeah,
be honest, answered a lot of those questions I don't know,
that's good. That's
because I
good.
didn't know. Yeah.
That's good. So you paid attention to your body. You would getting some of those signals. You had to acknowledge that you didn't have a mask that you knew how to put on. I'm going to hold on to that one because that's good imagery. And anybody who's been on a plane understands you really have to know where the mask is, that you have access to it, and know how to put it on. But then also, you took time to look into resources. You did a little research, and I want to encourage anyone listening to do that, because any person who says that they are a counselor or a therapist doesn't mean that they are the best match for you. And there are different therapeutic ideologies, if we will. There are different processes and ways that therapists view life, and you want to get connected with someone who you feel can really help you and not just listen and take your money, which is
Correct.
another issue because resources are a problem for some people who don't have the capital to take care of themselves in this manner. Now, we know there is already health disparities with food insecurities, and then on top of that, the things that happen to our bodies when we're on all this medication. That's a whole nother conversation. But for something, just to have a conversation, to dig into what's going on internally, emotionally, and psychologically, you need to have some assistance. And there may be some resources that you can look into. So, Marlon,
I think it was interesting.
Oh, go
I don't
ahead.
mean to interrupt you, but I think it was very interesting. One of the things that I noticed was several of the counselors spoke to specialties with women, issues around LGBTQ. I thought those were all valuable. There was only one of those. I would dare say I looked at least 75 to 80 counselors who spoke to saying they spoke to issues around men and men's wellness. There was only one. And I thought that said a lot to what I think some of the issue is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's also part of the reason that I like having these conversations. Now, Marlon and I, like I said at the beginning, we've known each other like 20 years. And in the last maybe 10 years, we've become even closer friends. So we have a very robust conversation. I would dare say we just flat out argue sometimes. But it's healthy because we sharpen each other. And one of the reasons when I felt like I wanted to do this series called The Other Side, or From the Other Side, it's because there are so many ways that, first of all, women don't get an opportunity to talk to men about real topics and get a perspective that will help them know how to support men, not to enable poor behavior, not even to try to rescue and save, but to just really understand and become better mothers to sons, sisters to brothers, friends, wives to husbands, of course. So we need these conversations. But I also realize that sometimes hearing certain things, the way a woman will ask a question, because we've been through this back and forth, right? We've been, well, you'll tell me, well, that's a woman's, you're trying to make me, I'm not your girlfriend. That's what he always did. I'm not trying to make me
I'm not gonna be your girlfriend.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. But there are so many ways that I know there are women who are raising sons, and they may not have a village of men that are speaking positively and helping them work through it, or that there are women who are married to or in certain relationships with men that need what you just said, but it's very delicate. We always told we're trying to push men do something, tell the honeydews or to tell you to do this or that, but we want to encourage men to live. You said several times, your body, you're working yourself to death, but you thought it was just normal. It's just what you got to do. So how would you suggest, give me your 20-second approach to encouraging a woman in helping her, whoever that male is in her life, seek help because he's been resistant, or because he's just become overwhelmed and it's just a lot. He doesn't even realize that he's living with some things that are tearing him down. What would be your encouragement for women?
I think the first thing is, if you have a man in your life, men, and this is a generalization, but men in general, particularly for their loved ones, want to provide, want to care. And if a man has a wife, daughter, even sisters and mothers, if a woman says to that man, I feel like you're not going to be here for us, I guarantee he'll start to look for that. And that sounds like it's manipulation, but it's not. If a woman said, one of the things that scared me was not being here for my granddaughter when I know she needs me. And that realization was what motivated me more than anything. I'm taking care of my mother now that my father has passed away. And so all of the women in my life, I felt an obligation to figure out how to put this mask on so that I could help them. And so I think the other thing that women need to understand is that men are not processing with their hearts, they're processing with their minds. And so that when you're asking me how I feel, I I don't even know really what that fully means.
Now I'm
You
gonna push
asked me.
back. Hold on, I'm gonna push back because we do have some. Yeah, this is. I have to do it. I have to
No,
do
I
it.
know.
It's a generalization. You know how I
It's
feel
a
about those.
generalization. It's a
Yes.
generalization.
Okay.
But I think most men, we have not been trained to think through our emotions or to access them. Again, that's a tool. That really is. When
We taught
men,
to suppress them.
yeah, we're taught.
Yeah.
Well, I think we never do well. We're taught to lean on what we think and what we can do, right? So that if I can do it, it doesn't. If I can lift 1,000 pounds, right? I can then get past the hurt that it puts in my body because the accolade and the affirmation that I get come from my ability to lift that. Do you get what I'm saying? I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I do, but I inserted there because I know that some men are taught from early on to suppress because boys don't cry.
Boys don't cry, right?
And you also taught to suppress certain what we would call more feminine, what generally are called the softer emotions or feminine emotions, but in sports and so many other places, aggression and anger and all of that you can express because that's be a man, that right. All that raw. Right.
But sports does something for men that most of life doesn't give us, which is rules that you can then follow to get to your goal. Life takes the rules away, yes. Right? And so you told me if I catch this ball and I run 10 yards, then I'm moving forward.
Yeah.
Life doesn't say that. You look at life and you like, well, I went 10 yards forward, but all you see is that you haven't gotten far enough. And so life doesn't give you the game rules that sports does. Sports gives men a sense of control, a sense of I know what this does. And thus I can practice. I can do that thing. Right.
And I have more agency in it. There are certain things I can control. Life takes out a whole
bunch of stuff.
A whole lot of that. Yeah.
Right. It does. It takes a lot of that. And so, and that's where I get affirmation also.
Yeah.
I get affirmation for that. There's everything in my life has told me what it means to be a man. And none of that was about doing the other stuff that we talk about.
Wow. I think you have given us a lot to think about. You've given us a lot to consider. And I hope that there are women who are watching, even though this is about the male perspective from the other side. I hope that there are men and women watching who will take what you've poured out of your own experience, but also sit for a moment and process and think about, what have I been told from my past that may be detrimental to me right now? What is my body telling me? What have I been excusing away? What have I been ignoring? How am I dealing with loss and grief and death and these major transitions of life that I may know mentally I need to handle in a better way? But if I don't have the tools to do that, where can I go get those tools? And then give yourself permission to do that. Do what it takes to take care of yourself and find the safe space, find the resources to do that. I thank you for opening up this way. You shared on social media about your first therapeutic appointment, and I thought it was great, but I also know because of your influence and because of the place you have with other men and those who are in reentry and some who may need to take that step, that's why you opened up to share it.
Yes, I did. I didn't think I would do that, but I happened to be listening to Praise 92.1, and I heard this woman talking about, from the male perspective, how when men are suffering mental and emotional health issues, that they become caricatured. And she talked about Will Smith, how we become memes, or even Kanye West and other people. And she said, so whenever men then experience those things, they become memes and caricatures. And I knew that at that moment, I just had a word in my heart that said, "Okay, you need to say what you've just done," because I just uh, made the appointment the day before that. So,
Yeah.
and I knew I had fraternity brothers, and since then I've had so many men in my fraternity, men who have been in my prison reentry program, men that I don't even know, hit me up and say, "Man, I'm dealing with this too," and
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear this. And so I think I give it all to God on that, because I wouldn't have never done. I'm good with
Yeah.
keeping my business my business.
You are. Every now and then you'll let something leak out, but this is the beauty of helping others when we feel even that it makes us vulnerable or that we're exposing too much. You never know who will connect with that and need it. That may be that one little blip, that post, that little thing, maybe what is needed to help them take their next step. I'm going to wrap this up, and just I want to acknowledge what we have grieved and been sad about. Many have grieved and been sad about recently with the death of Twitch, DJ Twitch. And I bring this up only to say that many times men mask and hide a lot of pain or struggle without knowing that they can release it, or not giving themselves, I keep saying permission to, because a lot of our bondage is because we won't give ourselves permission to do something different, whether it is fear of what others will think, whether it is just the being overwhelmed with what it means to even reach out and cry out for help. Those aren't typically described as manly things, to cry out for help. Even to say that, most men think of that as a feminine thing. Women cry out for help, but there are ways that men cry out for help, and sometimes we don't even recognize the signs, or they're really good at hiding the pain and suppressing it until there is a breaking point, and then there is no opportunity for support. So before I end this, I do want to acknowledge again and ask all of the women and my brothers, but if you are a woman listening, pass this on to a brother, okay? If you are a man listening, make the first step. Be encouraged, because there is someone who can give you support, give you tools so that you can find the mask that fits you and learn how to wear it, how to apply it, so that not only you can live, but then you can be present and healthy for those that you love. I appreciate you, Dr. Smith.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you so much for being with us, and for everyone who is watching right now. Let me say that I am returning with more interviews, and this is just the beginning of what I hope will be a wonderful series of conversations with men who have been a blessing to me, but also have dynamic stories that I know will empower and strengthen you to live the intensified life. That's why we do this, to bless someone else so that you can see there is hope, there is God, there is a way for you to live an abundant life and be joyful. You're watching the Intensified Life TV with Dr. Lakeisha B. Hey, wait, don't forget, subscribe, like, and share. Make sure that you don't keep this good information to yourself. Be a blessing to someone else.